Hello, so we are now continuing the next day our video, and we're now going to talk Jon Snow and his storyline. On the whole, it's perfectly solid and fine for the most part, but there were more problems with this one than some of the ones we spoke about earlier, especially with
we
Stark.
had some quite a lot of hopes for where this was going to go, because there's some really interesting things happening, and probably one of my favorite characters introduced in A Storm of Swords is Mance Rayder. So I was very apprehensive about the casting from the start.
Yeah, Ciarán Hinds.
I like Ciarán Hinds. I should say that I like Ciarán Hinds. I think the idea of having him in Game of Thrones was great. I just don't think this was the role for him.
No, I think it's quite the miscast role, because the Mance Rayder of the novels is it's just younger and more vibrant, more full of life. Yeah. This a little more, you can almost say, eccentric as well. The singing, the songs. Yeah. He's someone who is more mercurial and feels more. Ciarán Hinds projects gravitas. That's what he's really good at.
It's quite the wrong thing, because he's an obvious leader and Mance Rayder isn't.
Yeah.
And the whole idea with Jon when he comes into his tent for the first time is that he mistakes somebody else for Mance, because Mance is sitting around in the corner and he's playing, he's a singer, and he doesn't look like a man in command, and it's, this is Caesar.
And then they just didn't really do much with him. No. He was there for a couple episodes and then he's gone.
And quite one note in his behavior. He's more of a hard-ass wildling, and the fact that they dropped and changed the way that Jon persuades him or that he is really wanting to join them, and that they don't have Mance telling his story about why.
I was going to bring that up as well. His story for why he decided what was the thing that finally made him decide I'm quitting this. I'm going to join the Wildlings. He was a very thin character, and it was kind of underwhelming. And similarly, I'm afraid to say it. I was looking back at an old interview I did near the start of the season with the Connectivist interview, and we asked what are we looking forward to, and I mentioned that the first trailer had just come out, showing Christopher Hivju as Tormund, and that really intense face of his as he's climbing the wall. I thought, wow, I was really excited. Yeah. And I don't fault him. I fault the writers, because the Tormund Giantsbane that everyone loves in the books is not really in the show.
It's odd. You could say that they don't want to go with sort of kind of burlesque comedy that he goes for, and then they have the Podrick joke. If they're going to have that sort of ridiculous humor, what is wrong with this rough and tumble wildling?
Jolly, laughing, boasting, liar.
Go from that one moment to the next moment saying, if you betray us, I'll kill you.
Yeah.
But it's the contrast. They lose those a lot.
Yeah, other than basically the one scene in George's episode, episode 7, he doesn't really he feels like a generic sort of barbarian chieftain. He doesn't feel like Tormund.
And the same with Mance, he's just a tough guy, and also Ygritte, I feel, while I don't dislike the casting of Rose Leslie as Ygritte, I think she's great for it, I think that they are writing her so one note. She's all about being a tough wildling woman. There is none of the nuances in the novels where she tells, Jon about the last of the giants, the song, and she's crying because the magnitude of these people who've been all but gone extinct, and there's a kind of a sentimental, melancholy side to her.
Absolutely,
that doesn't come out at all.
No, I think a lot of it is they recast the relationship as sort of you and me versus the world, and very Bonnie and Clyde. It felt very cliche for Hollywood. It felt very cliched Hollywood kind of thing. I didn't care for that, but the story was good. Kissed by Fire, excellent. Although, as some rightly noted, yes, them sleeping together was important, but they really missed a lot of the interactions that lead up to it. So you just kind of have to assume that her. It felt a lot like. The way we characterized the relationship, it was a lot like the little girl pulling the little boy's hair on the playground because she likes him. Yeah. And it didn't really feel like it moved beyond that. And then suddenly, they're lovers. Well, that's a constraint. But it's a constraint specifically because I said, well, we're going to double how much time we spend King's Landing. We're going to make sure Tyrion is the number one character on screen. We're going to make sure that Theon's on the screen all the time. They really ate into it, and I think if they hadn't done that, Jon's story would have been even stronger. Now you can say, well, the show overall wouldn't have been as strong. That's a what if maybe thing. I think the material was strong
just like
enough
they
to sustain
changed
it.
sort of Arya's formative experience. I mean, Jon's time among the wildlings is quite important in showing him a different perspective of things, different ways of doing things, and it's partly because he interacts with them. He gets to see some of them as people,
Yes.
as friends, and it complicates his picture of how things work.
Absolutely, and I mean, it's weird that they basically at the end of the season they've given Sam that idea.
That's true.
And in fact, I just realized, I think his line to Aemon about, the realms, and that includes them, I think that's something that Jon pretty much says
I believe
in
that is
A Dance
it.
of Dragons. So, but they've kind of given that to Sam, and we don't see, and we're going to assume Jon's going to be in agreement with that, but he's not the originator, and he's not the one, we don't see his progression towards that. We see it with Sam, I guess, because he's hanging out with Gilly, and they're running, and he's seen the horrors, and I don't know, it just felt they really underplayed that part of Jon's story.
It's a lot of nuances that they lost in it.
Yeah. It works fine, but and I think Kit Harington does better in the last few episodes than he did in
Yes,
in
and we
the
feel
first
that perhaps filming in
Iceland
was limiting. They had, it was tougher weather, and they couldn't do as many retakes as perhaps they needed. And then, of course, we had Kit Harington having broken his ankle before filming while breaking into his own house or something.
Yeah, no, apparently trying to climb in the window after he locked himself out.
Yes,
so that certainly
they probably had problems with time in general for them.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how the next season goes. With his arrival there. And I'm kind of curious to see how we're going to play out that material, actually, because they could rush it, they could go like really fast with it, or they can kind of play things out more gradually over time. In particular, one thing.
Trying to play more of the politics and.
Well, I mean, one thing, of course, there's no real politics to begin with because there's no real leadership. But Donald Noy is basically in charge for much of it, and he's not been introduced. Some have wondered, are we going to see Alistair Thorne again? Are we going to manage to get the actor back? And it would be great. He was great. Or are we just going to have Jon just be the natural leader, like everyone else's?
I mean, they did have Slinson.
Slynt's gone. Well, Slynt has been sent. No, Slynt has been sent to the wall. We haven't seen him. Whether they're planning to reintroduce that thread or not.
So it's possible.
But I mean, in the books, he shows up quite late.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Now, the next one may be a little controversial because it's getting towards the end of the list of point of views, but it's Sansa, and it's not at all because of Sophie Turner.
We like Sophie Turner. We still think she's a great choice for the character, and that she does her part very well. But the storyline, the way they've changed her storyline and the characters around her, that's the problem.
That's really the problem. I mean, first off, she's a big part of the window into Westeros.
Yeah.
Now, again, we've already touched on Marjorie a bit, and I know it. I am more accepting, but I still find it a bit dreary that they've gone with a character that Natalie Dormer has already played before on the Tudors, basically.
They cast basically her as Anne Boleyn again, and I
also
find that there's a problem in the way that she is
interacting with Sansa.
And sometimes trying to act her age, sort of sharing silly stories about rivalries and such. So she's acting like a teenager there with Sansa. And it's quite clear that the character isn't cast as a teenager.
No,
in that case, she's a very, very unbelievable teenager.
Or the first thing of her going around to the orphanages and giving out toys. It's I don't mind the idea of seeing a noble do acts of charity, alms to the poor and so on, but the depiction, the personal touch, the little toys, and it felt very heavy-handed to sell that. And then Olenna proved to be. I mean, it grew on me after a few watches. I think my initial reaction was quite a lot of disappointment. I had a very strong image in my head of how she
Yeah.
should be, and I don't think she really plays very strongly to that image.
No.
But she still has some zing and some fire to her. I
Yeah.
think my problem with her develops when or the use of her
The
for
scene with Tywin.
the scene of Tywin Lannister is a big one.
The
second-
exchange there is so unbelievable. And
Yes, a
it's
sword
just-
swallower for sure. And a
It's
lot of
just
people thought that was hilarious.
laughable.
I
And
felt-
it's not laughable in a good way.
It felt incredibly juvenile, and
Yes.
I'm not surprised people found it funny and everyone kept quoting it, but to me it was like, wow, that's like really juvenile.
And would a character say that in the setting? Like, no.
Worse still was her trying to insinuate that,
Yes.
oh, but I'm sure you...
Yeah.
Come on.
And, like making the reach sound as if, yeah, sure, here we're all a little gay on the side.
No, they exaggerate some things, and it just felt very silly to me, and I wish they hadn't gone that route. Even with the logical problems, I don't think. I mean,
Yeah.
the threat to force Loras into the King's Guard
Yeah,
makes no
we've
sense.
covered that, and it was insane. But in general, they handled Loras the way they decided to
But
use
Loras
the
was a
character.
huge problem in the sense that, but he's an idiot.
Yeah.
But he's an idiot who sleeps with the first
Yeah.
pretty squire he sees, and spills everything to him immediately. One
It
night.
doesn't mention Renly once.
It doesn't show any of the regret. I mean, I had no problem with the idea that he would sleep with someone. No problem that he would, as a rebound, as an attempt to sort of recover something of himself.
But they should have shown something.
Something, and I think it feels...
And
it
then
feels
Loras and Sansa, and Loras, the perfect courtier from Highgarden, not being able to
babbling and
have a little conversation with his bride-to-be.
before he starts turning into topics of fashion, and
Right.
then he can talk about
Yes,
you know,
like,
his
do we
fringed
have to...
sleeves. And
Yeah.
fringed, by the way, not French. A lot of people were yelling, he said French sleeves, not fringe.
Yes,
give the
I-
writers a little credit.
I did do the same thing. I go, oh my god, French sleeves? But no, they were fringed.
But,
And it's so stereotypical.
it is stereotypical to just say that, oh, he's comfortable talking about.
Yes. Like,
Showing
people were
passion.
laughing as I'm basically saying, okay, so he wants, my dream Barbie wedding, basically.
Apparently. I don't know. He ought to be able to have conversations with her kind of on cruise control, and not really that awkwardness of the silence. Even if it's he's his future potential bride, it's not.
It shouldn't be a problem.
It shouldn't be a problem. So I
mean, the one time in the books when he's escorting her to the dinner, the one time he falters is when she mentions one of the knights that he kills in his rage after Renly's
who was a
death.
friend of his, basically.
Who was a friend, and then his
Renly
demeanor
and
changes. But other than that, and I mean, haven't given him any of those reactions. They didn't give him any of those reactions to Renly's death. and
So
it's just-
if you did not see the DVD extra from second season, show the sort of the hidden scene showing his reaction to Renly's death, more extended. If you just had season 3 in front of you, Renly doesn't exist. It didn't matter. It's gone. He's put it behind him.
Yeah.
And I think that's a failure of a show. People, oh well, some people can react like that. They can, yeah, but the show doesn't really show it. It just failed. So, but let's go back to Sansa. Since I realize that we've kind of been talking a lot about the
yes,
heroes.
but Sansa is, of course, very much reduced to being a pawn because so much of her chapters are very internal.
This is true.
Also, her actions...
Alright, well one thing they have lost from her chapters are the visits to Dawntoast, where it's her little rebellion running away to the Godswood to have these secret conversations and start planning her escape.
True. So that the one bit of agency that she did have, they removed. And of course, at the wedding, she kneels. Instead of refusing to kneel, to allow Tyrion to cloak her.
Which to me, I mean...
And this is all just playing into... Oh, Tyrion is such a nice guy, we can't ever be anything but nice to him. Because
it is a big problem, it's an increasing problem in the show for me, that Tyrion here is essentially a flawless person. Who because they've written like that, they've said, well, we can't really sell the idea that she doesn't like him, or that she doesn't want to be helpful towards him, so we kind of have to do this, because we worked ourselves into his corner. The Tyrion of the novels, even at this stage, is not the nicest person in the world. He is not the most pleasant person in the world. He is not someone who he can be spiteful.
Yeah.
He can be
His
envious.
upbringing, it's all. I mean, he's a dwarf. He's had a tough life. Obviously, no.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can fault him for, but he can be both bitter and spiteful. He can be vengeful. He has people killed for little things.
Not that little, but,
But
he in the first novel, he deliberately steps on the fingers of Marillion just because he can. He breaks someone's fingers just because he doesn't like the guy.
Yeah.
That sounds great. I mean, you think about it as a real person.
Yeah.
Like, do you think if somebody broke your fingers just because they felt like it? So just try and put yourself in the shoes of the person suffering this.
He will use his position. He'll use his power.
Absolutely, and I think he's come off as just too nice in that regard.
Yeah.
And I think the final episode really kind of highlighted this because that Sansa and Tyrion scene was just...
All of a sudden they are, a happy married couple.
Yeah, she's a little naive with the kind of silly shift joke, but whatever, I can't. But it's like, oh, okay, well, she said 2 episodes ago what she may never sleep with him, but you can see he's winning her over, right?
Of course, he's so handsome with the scar. He's so handsome with
the scar on his face, and never mind the fact that Tyrion Lannister is, I guess you're gonna try to say, I mean, twice her age, a dwarf, a member of the family that has slaughtered her father and tried to kill the rest of her family and has succeeded. I mean, they
just wanted that scene of, it's looking up for them, but we know what's happened in the previous episode, and then he walks in on her and she's crying and now it's going down the drain. It just seems like they just wanted that scene to set up, but once she gets the news, it's all going to...
Yeah, no.
And they do these things.
I mean, you can say, okay, this is a deviation, and we're complaining about it because it's a deviation. It's a deviation because the Sansa in the novel is a more complicated character than the Sansa on the show. The Sansa and the Tyrion of the show is less complicated than the Tyrion of the novel.
Yeah.
They seem to prefer extremes.
Yes.
And because I want to, it's dramatic to go from an extreme this to an extreme that.
Yeah.
But you lose the shades of grey, you lose the subtle moments.
Well, they also prefer to take out nuances of the characters in general. They like to make them...
Because they make them more extreme.
Yeah.
You take out the nuances, so they're more extremely this, or they're more extremely that.
Yeah.
And then, when something happens to flip them over and they do their, face turn or heels turn or whatever, it's more dramatic.
Yeah.
And I think it undersells a lot of these characters. It makes them... I kind of liked how... reading someone's review about, and I guess I should mention him because Littlefinger has a part in this. I can mention him here. How Littlefinger is now most clearly a villain, with the death of Ross and the murder of Ross or something. And I mean, Littlefinger is one of those characters who, George R. R. Martin himself has said he's quite different from his character in the novels, and this is.
I think he's singled him out as the perhaps most different.
Yes, he's probably the character, and I think he's mentioned Osha, of course, but much younger, different actors, and Littlefinger. It's like of the sort of the secondary characters. He's the one he keeps poking
and there's
out.
one where we thought that the casting would be perfect for the Littlefinger of the novels.
I think it can be, but what they're writing
is not
the Littlefinger novels. He's too obvious. He's too much of a
moustache twirling
villain. Yeah. There's a whole episode of this stuff just discussing what they're doing with Littlefinger. It's just he's so fumblingly obvious. Like he's been saying pretty much from the start what he wants to do. And to me, the interesting thing is like even through A Storm of Swords, and for some people even through A Feast for Crows, his exact plans and desires are still not really understood. Like he's got spite and envy towards people who he feels slighted him. Yeah. He wants to be the power behind the throne. But there's some aspects of what he wants that are so kind of unclear. And this one you can read like a book. Everything is laid out for you, and I feel that that's another disservice. Like, and it's part of it is again the resistance to anything mysterious.
Yeah.
Leaving any long-term mysteries.
Yeah. They want the characters, people to be able to identify what the characters are, what the characters want, and I think to go back to Sansa, we're not really seeing her development. They're not really writing her development. Yes, they have her in a scene saying that, oh, I was such a silly little girl, but we're not seeing any sort of gradual understanding of her becoming less naive. In fact, having that scene with Tyrion, with her being so very naive there with that joke, shouldn't we start seeing the much more thoughtful, serious Sansa?
I think something of that is probably about time. Maybe you'll do some of it in the 4th season.
Yeah.
I mean, there are events that happen there where they may decide that she has to be a more knowing participant. I mean, we've tried to avoid not being too spoilery for this, so if you know what we're talking about, I mean, just think about the fact that she wasn't really a knowing participant.
Yeah.
She was, but if maybe that's what it'll do. Will make her a knowing, willing participant. But then to me, that feels like, well, that's dramatic.
Yeah.
Because it's such an extreme, like,
yeah.
oh wow, she's gonna do this. I mean,
rather than having her growing up more slowly, becoming by necessity more aware, and still isn't having those moments of rebellion, that her little things that she tries.
Yes, I mean, I think, the failure to kneel was one of the ones that really, like, I mean, and you look at it and you read the chapter, like, it is spiteful. Like, she kind of, after she does it, she kind of feels sorry, but she did it. But that's, to me, that's complexity in a character. But they do something and then they can regret doing it, like, almost instantly.
Yeah.
But because they had that
it's like
impulse.
what they took away from Tyrion, having him, kidnapping and holding Tommen hostage and saying that whatever you do to Alayaya, and obviously we don't have an Alayaya,
or Ross and whatever,
will happen to Tommen,
including the rapes.
Yes, and he afterwards he's like saying, I can't do that, but I said I would. I have to.
I won't be taking at my word if I make a threat. If I don't
follow
through.
And then he's relieved to realize, well,
I don't have to make a choice
but he thinks that I'll have to, no matter how much I regret it, how horrible I think it is, and they take away that sort of complexity.
So. Let's see. So moving on to the next character, and the next character actually happens to be Tyrion Lannister. So.
Quite far down on our list.
Quite far down. It's not.
Peter Dinklage is a great actor, but
they're giving him too much. I mean, I think someone did a count. He had something like 227 lines. Like the next closest actor had like 100 something lines.
Yeah. It's not a Tyrion show.
Yes, they're making it a Tyrion show. It shouldn't be a Tyrion show. It's an enormous amount of time spent with Tyrion Lannister, and fine. I guess, other than the Podrick business, which was just awful. It was a joke, and I was so saddened by the amount of people who said, "Oh, well, this is clearly a plot. Maybe it's Tyrion paid the women to claim that they didn't want to be paid, or to kind of boost his ego." I'm like, okay, what kind of things do you do to a guy when after that every other woman he sees is like, yeah, you're all right. Like, what happened? I was the greatest lover ever. So that was just a bad joke.
Yeah.
And they kept running with it. I was sad
they even had it in the last episode.
In the final episode, yes. They brought it up again. I mean,
it's even supposed to have got into the noble women of court laughing about, oh, it's him. Tripod.
Sometimes, to me, this is, I can really only compare this to the way that Peter Jackson became progressively more self-indulgent in his goofy juvenile humor in the Lord of the Rings films. I mean, there's some really bad humor in the final film.
Yeah, the dwarf tossing and
repeated jokes, and I mean, there's repeated things that are just kind of goofy and silly, and they indulge themselves, and I wish they hadn't. Because the other thing is, the Podrick stuff took some minutes that could have been devoted to other things. Yeah. I know. Okay, you want to feature some of your actors. You want a bit of Braun. You want a bit of Daniel Portman, but they could have found something else. I mean, Daniel Portman's supposed to be playing a relatively young character. How about he interacts with Sansa at some point? I mean, why do we have to have Podrick, the sex god, the greatest lover in the world? I won't be shocked if next season we're gonna find him in bed with Cersei or something. I don't know. It was just
and then we have a scene with Varys and Ross after. Yeah, I mean, it's just.
It was Varys and Ross were obviously confirming, but this is a real thing, and it's like.
No.
But okay, Tyrion in general. I mean, everything's fine. Everything is really kind of fine. It's just
the whitewash.
It's the whitewashing of a
Yeah.
character. It's making him less complicated. And it's just giving us too much of him. And you realize how many other stories are getting shortchanged.
Yeah.
Because they decided to bulk up King's Landing. I don't think people would have been sad if we had half as much King's Landing and we had twice as much of stuff with Arya and Jon and everyone else basically.
Yeah. And I mean, what are they gonna do going forward with Tyrion? Because he can't be in that position of taking up so much space with some of the later storylines.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like they feel like they're never going to be able to cut back his story time. And that really is going to be a genuine problem for the show.
Yeah, because his...
unless they do some radical changes to that storyline
yeah.
of his, it's going to be a real problem.
It's going to be a real problem.
So, we'll see where that goes. I mean, I don't know what else to say really about it. It's just, it's starting to be too much. It's like last season they had these scenes where you could tell they loved writing them, like Arya and Tywin.
Yeah.
Like you could tell, and they're great ideas on paper. And as individual scenes, they're great. But you realize that they're not contributing strongly to the rest of the story.
Arcs, the story,
yeah. And it feels like with
and in
Tyrion,
this sort of show, everything really has to. There are so many storylines and characters to service, there isn't time for fluff.
Yeah, just searching for
Especially not fluff that doesn't really give you any deeper insight into characters. So something that you just lets you see more of a character and get more under their skin, get more sympathy for them, get more understanding of them. Doesn't necessarily have to drive the story forward in that moment, but it has to at least do one of those two things: deepening the character or moving the story forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think back through the season of all the Tyrion scenes, and like most of the Tyrion scenes in the first half, other than the Potter thing, I don't really think much about them. I don't really remember much about them. They're not pretty memorable. And
but there's an early scene in the first episode, I guess.
I guess him going out to see his father, that was a good one. That was a great episode. And I do have to say, the Cersei scene where she meets Tywin and he's doing the exact same thing to her, but he did to Tyrion, making him wait on him.
True. Yeah.
That was a nice touch. I do give them credit for that one.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It felt like he was overused, and I felt just give us some more solid Sansa material instead.
Yeah.
Without having the confidant of Dantos, I'm not quite sure how they could do it, but it would have been interesting to see her interact a bit more widely. I mean, a Tywin Sansa scene. That could be interesting.
Yeah, since they were doing Tywin Arya,
why not show how? I mean, that could have been really interesting. As far as I know, they never directly interact.
No.
At all. They never exchanged a single word this season, and that.
We get some Sansa and Shay, of course, but Shay is another problem in the Tyrion.
Yeah, Shay. I think they failed.
The idea of making it more of a equal relationship, sort of, or more of a love match.
They're not really selling it. They're not. Yeah, it's not working for me, and I don't blame the actors again. It's the writing. They make choices like, if they're gonna have Tyrion, how about showing some Shay and Tyrion intimate moments where we're not in arguments? Like, what is it about her that he likes?
Yeah.
Is it just the sex?
That's a lot.
Is it that when they're not arguing, there's a real connection?
Yeah.
We don't get it. Every time we see her, it's basically her insecurities.
Yeah.
And it's his insecurity, and we don't.
I mean, she is a very, very bad prostitute. She's doing a very bad job of trying to please her client because she's constantly yelling at him.
Absolutely.
I guess that's supposed to be the love match, but as I said, we don't see it. So
yeah.
So why should he want to keep her around?
So I think there's some real problems with the sort of surrounding supporting material that they have for Tyrion, and I think they're not using him properly. And when they are using him, it's just they're using him to do too much stuff in King's Landing, and I don't know what they're doing. I mean, the thing is A Storm of Swords, like the first half, King's Landing is a relatively small part of the story. Our preference is, if something is a small part of a story in a book, it should be a small part of the story in the novel.
I mean, what are they in the next half for King's Landing is a bigger part.
It's
It's
a
going to
much
be
bigger-
even...
It's a much bigger portion in the second half.
Yeah, so how much are we going to get of Tyrion next season?
No, it's baffling. So a lot of it is a bit of anxiety about what they're doing in the future. Maybe they'll solve it. Maybe they'll have a great solution. But right now, yeah.
But we're also looking, given the whole whitewashing, for a real flip-flop of Tyrion in the future.
Yeah, but
which is going to be just
dramatic.
dramatic.
And the point of view character, who's sort of our least favorite in terms of adaptation from Storm of Swords. It's not the last character we're going to cover, but the last point of view character is Catelyn Stark. You've watched this stuff, you know that Catelyn is my personal favorite. If you've watched it, you know that we've had big issues with how we depicted her. It's not Michelle Fairley's fault, except possibly in the sense that sometimes when I read interviews or when I've interviewed her myself, some of her interpretations of what's going on with Catelyn, I disagree with. Is her personal...
Yeah. Has she read the books? I don't...
She read the first two for sure.
Okay.
I don't recall if she read Storm of Swords.
Because, I mean, that's one problem that I do fault... I feel that I can fault Dinklage a little bit for... I feel that if he had actually read further, he might have had some input on his character, because I've always felt that part of the reason that Viserys was such a fabulous character in the first season was that Harry Lloyd read all the books and decided to really get under the skin of the character as written, and actually appears to have had some input on that. Maybe that's something that can only happen in a first season. I don't know.
Well, you know, for example, I mean, Natalie Dormer has made much of the fact that she had input on Marjorie to try and help the writers. I don't know, maybe she's read. I can't quite recall if she's read or not. No. But the thing is, it's true. But the writers, and I think one can credit them for it, want to be a little collaborative.
Yes. And
they take input from the actors, and sometimes not necessarily in good ways. But for example, when Emilia Clarke and Jason Momoa felt it wasn't working for them as actors.
Yeah.
How to handle the wedding scene, they changed it. Now I don't think that's necessarily good, but hey, that's input from the actors.
Yes.
I think actors who read the material might be more likely to say, well, you know, why don't we do this?
Yes.
Because I kind of liked how that worked, and maybe they'll influence them in a positive direction.
So the fact that people like Lena Headey and Peter Dinklage haven't...
Lena Headey is Dinklage read the first one, I know that much.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure he has said that he hasn't read anymore. I can't say for certain.
It's not really his
anyway,
thing, and he...
Yeah, so I think that in those cases, if they had had the understanding of the character from the novels, that it would color their performance and color.
Certainly it could, yeah. Because, Cersei's very different. But, Catelyn.
Yeah.
So, what to say about Catelyn? I mean, episode 3 had that scene about Jon Snow, and...
Yeah, that was one of 2 or 3 times this season where I just basically yelled at the TV.
Yeah.
Because I knew, actually, as soon as the scene started, she's going to say, it's Jon.
I couldn't believe it.
No. I knew.
Because despite our criticisms, I always try to enter these things optimistically and with the assumption that they'll work it out. They're going to come to a solution. Like I recall last season with Jon chasing after Ygritte and getting separated. They'll get it back in time.
We'll still get that Qhorin scene.
Like Qhorin is going to rescue him, and then they're going to be running away, and we'll still get that. And no, they didn't. And at some point, my optimism and my inclination to assume the best will be worn down, I think. Because right now, I keep thinking okay, but that one was, and I'm not the only person, Jace Lake was the one who actually first introduced the idea of character assassination into the discussion, but he felt that was a character assassination of Catelyn. And I think Catelyn, so that same list of characters by line, Catelyn was number 38 of 40 characters. I think Bronn had a line more than her. Bronn!
I mean, she is tonally one of the most significant. She does so much to inform that part of Storm of Swords that she is in.
I mean, and not just that. I mean, I think she informed, and this is, the atmosphere and the mood and the tone of that novel, and that first half of the novel, so very powerful. Yeah. She is. People may not like reading her chapters. I don't understand why, because they're beautifully written chapters. But yes, they are oppressive with the darkness of her thoughts and the tragedy that is surrounding her.
Yeah.
And the sense of foreboding, of doom, of something being wrong.
Yeah.
You may not like the negativity, but that's what A Storm of Swords is. It's a very negative novel. Things are going to be removed from the table. Things are not being added.
No.
Certainly in that first half, bad things are happening. Sansa is being forced to marry the imp.
Yeah.
Who is much uglier in the TV show. That scar is nothing to be proud of.
In the books.
In the books, sorry. In the books.
He loses like half his
nose.
And
he's horrible. And it's George pulls no punches. There's a lot of really bad things happening to people. And I think Catelyn is sort of she really helps set the tone and atmosphere.
Yeah.
So when they shut her up, and I mean, probably the most egregious of all things was, I think it's Second Sons. In which it's raining, and they can't get there. No, sorry. It's actually George's episode, 7,
right.
So I was shocked that even George couldn't do this, but it's raining and they're talking about being delayed, and she starts talking, and she is constantly being interrupted by the Blackfish.
Yes.
And then Edward talks, and the Blackfish shuts up.
Yeah. The Blackfish, of course, being another huge problem, but they just, we want a tough guy.
Yeah.
So he is just this.
Well, he's like a mix of a great Jon, but he's really a bully and a brute. And I didn't like him. And I mean, the actor, I was so looking forward to him.
Yeah.
But he wasn't, and I have to say, I mean, there are certain people who are extreme Blackfish fans. And I knew, and they were constantly sad that he wasn't showing up now in the first season, and they were so overjoyed that he was appearing at first. When they saw who was cast, they were like, great, he looks perfect.
Yeah.
And I've seen him be so incredibly disappointed. But he's not the Blackfish of a novel.
Yeah.
He's more Great Jon than Blackfish.
Yeah.
He's not particularly likable. I don't know. The writers make choices.
Simplifying and making an extreme and
I mean, you know what? I mean, I'm going to say it. In the books, it's very possible, it might even be probable, that Brendan Tully is gay. But the reason he has not married is it's sort of a family quote-unquote secret. Like, because Catelyn says, you know why he won't marry.
Yeah.
People want to imagine...
So if that's the case, they know.
If that's the case, they know that he's gay, and it's just not something that's really talked about. Because in Westeros, it's not really that horrifying. I mean, they don't treat it the same. It's not like...
You're not being burned at the stake.
You're not being burned at the stake.
On the other hand, if you're Lena Tyrell, you're not going to be sitting there and telling Tywin, oh, surely you were doing a bit when you were young.
Yeah, it's not. So... And they seem to have gotten rid of that. I mean, at least one of the scene where he mentions when Edmure is saying, man can compel another.
Yeah.
I mean, in the books, Brendan says, far be it from me to tell someone to marry, because I refused to marry so many times. And for my own reasons, they just got, I'll compel you with my fists or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, come on, what a bully. And I mean, Edmure, I was looking forward. I know you always see him as Brutus.
I mean, it's not nobody's fault, but yes, I feel like I'm just saying Brutus all the time because he's got that slightly worried, constantly to the.
But they made Edmure more shallow and less interesting again, and it's like, we didn't have time. Yeah, because we spent twice as much time as we should have in King's Landing because Tyrion needed so many lines.
We needed all the Tyrells more on stage and
everything. I mean, why not treat things equally? Why not give them...
I mean, you're writing a large portion of, the Tully stories, some of it is coming to an end in the season. Yeah. Why not have them more on stage?
I mean, I understood, not having Hoster at all.
No.
Okay, and but then they didn't really give that extra time to Edmure and Brendan.
No, they just gave it to
Yeah. So that's the big issue. I mean, that's part of the issue of Catelyn. Going back to Catelyn, they've silenced her so often.
Well, I think that particularly in the last episode, one of my big problems with the adaptation, after thinking back about how they did the Red Wedding and how they did her part in it, is the fact that at the end, she goes, quiet, catatonic, instead of mad and screaming. And it is specifically noted in the books that they cut her throat to basically shut her up.
Make an end. Well, to make an end.
Yes, but
she's gone mad. And
but she was screaming, so they basically took her voice away, silenced her by cutting her throat.
Which is
Whereas she's already standing there, quite silent and catatonic instead.
Yeah, this is an act of vengeance.
And it's sort of it changes again. It's with agency and this whole thing. It's sort of symbolically, they silenced her, they put an end to her, and they don't do that.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's a little odd because we have the Arya scene in the final episode, where the man that she kills, when he's talking about Catelyn being killed and sewing Greyjoy's head onto Robb, he specifically says that she was screaming until Black Walder silenced her.
Yeah, until he put an end to that.
Put an end to it. So
shut her up, I think.
Yeah. So did they? It seems they may have filmed it in two different ways.
It's possible.
Or had the intention of doing it that way and then changed it.
We can take it as being basically the guy wasn't really present and is making stories up about what he heard and they've heard that. But that sounds like it would have been better to me. And I think it's just. I remember thinking, and I haven't really seen. I remember thinking that if they do this right, if they do a season right, and this is like, I was thinking this like before the first season aired.
Yeah.
Michelle Fairley could get an Emmy. I don't think that anymore. I don't think that it's happening.
No, I don't think she got
I don't
time.
know.
I don't think they did the right things with the character and.
I just they didn't they took away so much of her story in particular. There's a massive loss of her
so
character.
She should have been sort of the emotional center of the first half of Storm of Swords.
And instead, they spend so much time with Robb and Talisa. I guess we should finish that one.
They shouldn't have been the emotional center of the story. It should have been Catelyn. She's the one carrying all the emotions, all the grief, and all of that. That should have been the focus.
Yeah. It's just. I like Richard Madden. Good-looking guy, great guy, nice guy, good actor. But
bland role.
But a bland kind of role, I guess. And Owen Chaplin, I thought she did fine with what she had to work with, but
what she had to work with was horrendous.
Was pretty awful. And the fact that so many people were trying to contrive how to make her really a Lannister spy, because they were trying there has to be something more than this, right? It can't be this.
It's just a sappy love story, but it was just a
sappy love story. For you who are still holding out hope, David Peterson released the original letter that she was writing in
it is
Valyrian,
a letter home to her mother,
telling her that she has a husband and she's pregnant with a child and that they'll come and visit soon. That's it. Talisa was never intended to be a spy. She's not a spy. She's not a honeypot from the Lannisters put out there. She is what she claimed she was, and she did what she claimed she did. And that's it. And you think,
they just wanted Robb more on stage, and they just wanted a love story. And last season was apparently the season of romance, which, of course, everyone who's read Clash of Kings felt that was the book of romance. And
yes, of course, it's an incredibly romantic book.
Yes. I read anything quite so romantic.
There's certain storylines that just don't work, and I think there is no. I can't really think of anyone. I'm sure it's happened, but I've very rarely seen anyone say, "Oh, this storyline from the novels is bringing down the show."
True.
It doesn't really happen. People, that fits. These characters are acting consistently. It's fitting the story.
I think logistically there are storylines coming up that
are going to be difficult.
They're going to be very difficult. It's not because they're bad storylines, but because they're very difficult to adapt.
Yes.
But so far they haven't really had any of those really tricky points, and they've still felt the need to change some storylines radically. And often when they change things, they do misstep because they don't seem to really fit it into the bigger picture thematically. They don't seem to get the right nuances, and they often falter with the wholly original material.
Yeah. Is this why on the forum the first season is definitely, this I've averaged out all the results, and the third season rated 8.11, and the second season was 7.95, and the first season was 8.5, I think, and so basically this season even though a lot of people thought that this was going to be the best season.
Because a lot of people feel that A Storm of Swords is the best book.
Yeah. It ended up being rated... It's rated closer to the nadir of the show, the second season, than it is to the first season.
Yeah.
Now, the fourth season has a lot of things going on, a lot of things happening, and maybe we're going to be able to adapt that. So it could be, that could become the best season, but it's interesting how the goalposts have moved, like, oh, did we say that this season, and we meant that season is going to be the one that's going to be.
Yeah.
So we'll see, but we're going to finish up with one more character.
Yeah.
So, Theon Greyjoy, now he is not a point of view character,
No.
no source.
And that's a problem.
And it's a problem that he is so much of him.
Just like they kept Richard Madden on stage for the whole of last season, they decided to keep Alfie Allen on stage.
Now, I have to say, I mean, if you look at our season 2 stuff, we loved what Alfie Allen did.
Yeah.
We loved his work. He was a surprise star for us.
Yeah.
He was fantastic, and they did a great job. And they always said, like, we were really interested in his storyline, and I thought it showed, and I thought they did a good job with it. But sometimes you can have too much of a good thing, and just because it's good that season doesn't necessarily mean it's right for this season. The torture porn, the naked ladies being thrown in there, and yes, that's in George's episode, but I have a suspicion that it's not actually George's writing, because we know a lot of scene shuffling took place.
We can't.
In that episode, we don't know for sure. I'm going to ask him when I get a chance.
Yeah.
So we'll find out whether that was actually his writing or not. Something about that one didn't feel right to me. But I mean, and even if it was his writing, I mean, he gets an outline from them of what they want in the episode, and he writes what they want. They are the bosses. He writes to order. So, that said, what really, like, is interesting to see discussions, even among non-viewers, or non-readers, especially of non-readers, of that revelation that, oh, that's Roose Bolton's son.
Yeah.
There's nothing. There's almost nothing.
No.
It made no real impact. And that's because they failed to show, like, oh, what's so treasonous about this?
Yeah.
What is the big treason? What is the big problem?
So he took Winterfell while the Ironborn was holding it and killed the Ironborn and took Theon hostage. What's the problem with that?
He's the one who, okay, I mean, it's not clear, but he's the one who burns down Winterfell. There's so many things that they kind of failed to really sell to make that interesting. And
because even in the conversation there with Roose and all the Frey, he talks about him taking Winterfell and the whole thing, but he doesn't offer any explanation or sort of how Winterfell ended up being burned down. That bit of an extreme measure to get a few Ironborn out of there.
Well, they already were out of there, so there was no reason to do it. It was spite, and it's just so senseless.
Yeah.
Some of his stuff, and it's so. And I thought Ewan Rian was fine. He's not quite the character in the novel, but he's fine.
Not
he's fine
all the character in the novel.
Fine, but he's fine. I mean, he comes across that craziness and that sadistic quality comes across pretty well. He's a little too maybe
I'm kind of seeing the Joker.
Heath Ledger Joker, kind of a little too that kind of laughing maniac, whatever. But whatever, it's
it's one
choice.
take away. He
does fine. He does well. And Alfie does well.
Yeah.
But that material wasn't needed this season.
No, it wasn't.
I think it would have been far stronger to have them say, oh, it's been burned down, the Ironborn disappeared, and then episode 10, Roose reveals, and you see Theon being tortured, and you see what's been happening to him.
Yeah.
That would have been stronger.
And then you could have the reveal of him being forced to answer to Reek, because as it is now, he just punches him a few times extra, and then all of a sudden he's Reek.
Yeah, to me, yes, okay, fine. He's been tortured a lot beforehand, but it's still, you just see like he has resistance, and he resists.
And if we hadn't seen what had been happening before, the
a couple of punches
implication of what had happened would have been much stronger than actually seeing him being tortured.
Yeah. So because
your mind would make up all sorts of horrific things.
Yes. I mean, to me, it would have been really powerful to have the final scene be, not what's your name. It was like you realize that he's answering to Reek.
Yes.
Like he's no longer Theon Greyjoy.
No.
He's already Reek. That would have worked, and but they took so much time. I don't know, 20, 25 minutes in a show that doesn't have that many minutes in the end.
And then the insert to the pointless and horrendous Asha Balwin scene, where all of a sudden Asha is also concerned about her little brother.
Yeah, it felt, I mean, to me sometimes a show can do something that is cheap, that is unearned. And yeah, Jawadi's stirring music and sort of reprise of the Greyjoy theme and is really stirring, but like, it's unearned.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel real
in
the context of a character.
In the context of what we've seen their interactions.
They've suddenly, like, they've... someone corrected me, and I guess they're correct. He hasn't been castrated. He's had a penectomy.
Oh.
So seeing the result of that penectomy...
didn't know that there was a term for that.
Yes. Seeing the result of the penectomy suddenly makes her realize, oh my god, this is...
My poor little brother.
You know, it's just...
My poor little eunuch brother.
It just doesn't feel right. And I mean, it just felt kind of corny and overdone. And I don't know. And I know some people are saying, oh well, she's going to turn around immediately when her father dies. Because, you know, those leeches happen and Melisandre believes they're going to die. So let's say Alan dies. And I say, no, you don't have this stirring big moment and then you turn around. You know, it's one thing when Kubrick did it in The Shining, the groundskeeper, knowing everything, and you keep visiting him along the way through the whole film, getting ready to go there, and Shining, and you set it up, you build, and then he arrives and he gets killed immediately.
Yeah.
But you can't end with a sudden,
no.
I'm going,
because
and then the
that
next
setup
episode,
leading
I'm coming
to
back.
the disappointment is a purpose in itself.
Yes.
But this is clearly not that sort of...
No.
It would be a dramatically completely wrong.
And also, what are we doing next season?
He's reached now.
And they're gonna. What are they going to do?
He's way ahead. This is one of the problems of people being way ahead storyline-wise, stitching him up with what he's supposed to be stitched up with, storylines and characters is going to be very difficult.
He is perhaps the one character who I cannot possibly fathom how we're going to do, because right now, it looks to me like they're going to give him his A Dance of Dragons material, and yet we have a bunch of characters who aren't even halfway through Storm of Swords yet.
No.
In particular, we're not really halfway through Storm of Swords for the Wall.
No.
How are we going to get that to fit together?
Because surely we can't continue with another season of him being tortured more.
I mean, look, a lot of people will say, oh, it's production stuff, like, he has a contract and they have to use him, or we'll have to end the contract and then they might not be able to get him back.
Yeah.
This show is not Beauty and the Beast. Alfie Allen is not Linda Hamilton. It's a much bigger cast. It's a much smaller role, comparatively speaking. Yes, he's great. Yeah, everyone seems to love him. Personally, they're colleagues, they're friends. But in the end of the day, what's best for the show is the actors are there to serve the show. The show is not there to serve the actors.
But they make that mistake all the time.
They make it all the time. And
also they knew from the start.
They knew it from the start.
They could have written it into people's contract.
Yes.
You're available. You're going to be in this season and that season. They had an outline.
I mean, it's possible some actors will say, I can't do that. I can't possibly do this, okay?
They had some options to work along those lines.
But they could have said, okay, we're going to use you for the final episode of this season. And that's it. We want to kind of hide you away until
they were able to do that with Asha and Balin.
Exactly. That's a perfect example. Asha and Balin, almost an entire season. And at the very end, they show up.
Yeah.
They had options on them. Said, we're going to need you for this season, and then we're going to need you for season. They could have done this, and they chose not to because they liked Alfie. It's not because it would have cost them too much or they would have lost him. And in the end of the day, if Alfie said, I want the exposure of being in so many scenes, and if I can't get it, I'd rather not do a show, then you say, well,
sorry.
So okay, you know, it's a shame, but okay, there you go. Because they can recast.
The show should come first.
Reek, they could show the portraits are horrible, but they get an actor who doesn't really quite look like him, but it has the makeup and it looks emaciated and the most, you know, age beyond his years. They could have another actor, and people won't go, oh my god, it's a different actor. I can't watch the show anymore. No. I don't think Game of Thrones is as sensitive to recasting as something like Beauty and the Beast, where you had two titular characters, two central characters, and a very small supporting cast.
Yeah.
Alfie Allen is part of a supporting cast, of a very large supporting cast.
Yeah.
And again, he did a great job. I'd like him to continue, but not if it hurts the overall show. And I thought that this season it hurt the overall show. It's
more
not his fault.
time
It's the writers who decided to do it. So, but I'm concerned that they're going to continue with it.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's covering everybody point of view wise in order of how we like them from best to least.
Yeah.
And you'll see a lot of it isn't so much like individual scenes. Like we're going, oh my god, all of these. There's some, but a lot of it's just the overall structure of a series that the writers chose to do.
Yeah.
And the way they decide to manipulate some storylines and depict some storylines, either focusing too much on them, focusing too little on them, inserting ones that shouldn't have been there that we're taking away. Losing the nuances.
Yeah.
So they can get better. They can get a lot better. I can't subscribe to this is one of the greatest TV shows ever.
No.
It's kind of interesting what I'm starting to see. It's suddenly come up in the last week or two. More and more people talking about the end of the golden age of television. The end of the age of The Sopranos and Deadwood and The Wire. Which is very funny because it's a very specific HBO-centric golden age.
Yeah.
But it's an age of dramatic television that was superlatively good.
Yeah.
That was above and beyond. And some people are citing Game of Thrones as part of the end of that golden age, because now we're becoming, Mo Ryan was writing about it as being a good thing. She calls it sort of the B-movieization of where genre television is becoming far more common and far more accepted.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good thing. We want
that
genre.
That is a good thing. We want genre, but it doesn't have to be, but I don't think it has to be treated as being, because it's genre, it gets a different scale.
No, because I think that part of the problem is that people who are reviewing it are perhaps not genre fans otherwise, and they're not so used to genre, so they are placing lower standards on it. They just think that, oh wow, this is so different, this is so new, and they don't realize that if you look at Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, compared to the fantasy genre, it is in fact something that goes very much beyond the cliches, and I'm not sure they're kind of setting it back again.
Yeah. I mean, I someday I'm going to have a round table with some critics. I want to ask them, because I keep feeling I read so many critical reviews, and I feel like you're letting things slide for Game of Thrones and Benioff and Weiss, but you would never let Matthew Weiner get away with on Mad Men. You would never let them get away from these sloppy things. You would call them on it.
No, I mean, you know, I'm not necessarily a Mad Men fan. You watch it, but I don't watch a lot of sort of modern day TV. I'm generally a genre TV watcher.
Yeah.
But I can tell when I watch with you that the subtlety is there, and that doesn't have to mean that it cannot. I fully believe that you can make something that appeals more broadly and still has subtlety, because that is what A Song of Ice and Fire has. Yeah.
So we'll see. 4th season, a lot of big stuff. A lot of opportunities to do some really great writing, a lot of opportunities to not do so well. So we'll see.
I think we wanted to comment as well on what we felt, sort of rating-wise, on the season in terms of. I mean, we both feel that it is stronger than the 2nd season, but not as strong as the 1st. I think that for me, it is very much the first part of the season that is strong. Now, I came into this with very low expectations from last season. I was the House of the Undying, and had just really shattered my feelings for the show. So I came in, well, you know, I'll try to watch it because we have the site and I'm going to be subtitling it, and you know. And so I was, in that sense, coming from a very low level. I was pleasantly surprised by the first 5 episodes. And I think that in retrospect, I do think they hold up. They are quite good. They have a lot of good things about them. But then really, I'm not fond of the back half of the season either. It really, they lost track of it. Not as bad as
the 2nd season's back half.
It's not as bad as the 2nd, but there are some
real
really
problems,
in particular the King's Landing storylines I found, for the most part, pretty unwatchable. I find that, you know, Charles Dance is a fabulous Tywin, but I really don't, for example, need him to go on about family another time. And
you know he is.
And I know
next season he is. When Jaime and the whole King's situation.
Yeah. So, and I basically tune out Cersei and Marjorie because I find them unwatchable. So I don't, not at home in King's Landing, but there were better things. I think there were some things, but they had they hadn't even better material this season.
Yeah.
I would say I prefer Storm of Swords to Clash of Kings, like most people, not by a huge margin, but I do. And it should have been even better.
Yeah. So, to wrap this up, let's just kind of recap and kind of go over some central things I think that are... I just want to discuss. One of it is the response to people who say, oh, you're just purist, you don't want any changes, you don't accept changes at all, you don't think about the production or what makes your television. And now, I get a lot of people trying to tell me, oh, you don't understand television, you only read books. Come on.
Yeah. If I tell you how much television he watches, I mean, it's absolutely true that I don't love television half as much as I love books, which is why I often leave some of the more in-depth commentary and actual review writing to LDO, because he watches a lot of television, he watches a lot of movies, he gets that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and it's not... I kind of watch all sorts of movies and television. Yeah. You know, I watch genre stuff, I watch comedies, but I mean, I adore great cinema. I adore the works of great directors and auteurs, Kurosawa and Kubrick and Tarkovsky and anyone else you can think of who you think is as a great director. I've probably watched at least one of her films, so I kind of know what I'm talking about. I like to think, but I think like, yes, television can convey atmosphere. It can convey mood. It can subtly convey all sorts of things. When we can't do this. No, just watch the history of film television. It is, and almost anything is possible.
And also, this is very relevant given that this is an adaptation of A Song of Ice and Fire. There are a lot of things that A Song of Ice and Fire does that is unusual for the book form as well.
Yes.
It does a lot of things that is contrary to what the genre expects, and it's not just killing off characters.
A lot of it is George said. A lot of his writing is informed by his experience of how he worked in Hollywood.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's part of the appeal, I'm sure, to Benioff and Weiss, is that there's something very cinematic about a lot of what George does.
So if he could write a successful series of books that didn't necessarily feel constrained by the genre and the medium, why should we keep saying that, oh, this is television, it has to be so and so? Because he didn't, when he wrote this, he didn't say, oh, this is fantasy, I have to do it in this way, I have to do it in that way.
No.
And at the same time, yes, there are production realities that have to be recognized. We don't... It's odd when we see other people who are forgiving of radical changes to character, simplifications of characters, and then they complain about all these surrounding characters, supporting cast having been cut. Of course they've been cut.
Yes, they don't have the time or the budget for all these actors. So for us, it's a bit odd to be in that position. I like the Red Wedding, the Battle Companion. Yes, it would have been fantastic to have the room and the time to have all these people that you get to know and like the Small John and Daisy, and then it makes it all more personal and horrific when you see them die.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing a bunch of nameless extras that you've never seen before.
But this would have had to be only the Robb Stark show for that to work.
And it's just not possible to medium, you see. So we're not purists in the sense that, we're purists in the sense that we want the spirit of the novels to be conveyed. And we want
the characters
and the characters and the story conveyed. And I think in broad part they kind of are covering like I keep thinking like we're ending up in a situation that this is becoming like Zack Snyder's adaptation of Watchmen. Not quite, but you know, a lot of people were extremely excited about Watchmen. It is one of the finest comic books ever written, especially in the superhero genre. Alan Moore is one of the best writers. And it was so amazing to see Zack Snyder said, we're using the comic book as a storyboard. Like, we're literally going to do every scene pretty much exactly as you... But he didn't understand. He didn't seem to convey the spirit. And the tone. And the meaning of it.
So something can be completely faithful in looks, in the characters that are being cast, and still miss out on what's the heart of the story. And so we don't feel that they like, for example, with last season, we felt that in What Is Dead they may never die. Even though they were adapting things of Theo's storyline differently because they had to collapse, they had to remove characters, they were getting the heart of it.
They were getting the heart of it. I mean, I said, I was looking at my review and I said, you know, just so much of the stuff that's happening at Theon, but it's brand new. Like, it's not from the books. It's not really even implied in the books.
Yeah.
George kind of skips over that period from his arrival to his being ready to join. He skips it.
Yeah.
They show it, and it feels so true and real, like how it might well have been.
Exactly.
And even if it wasn't how George envisioned it, because I mean, the main thing is George actually, all the Theon's doubts and such come out later when he's in Winterfell, when he's in charge of Winterfell, and he starts going a little mad with sort of his betrayal. He gets bothered by it. They do it now, and it works so beautifully.
Yeah.
So they really got it, and they really can get something. And sometimes they seem to just completely miss the ball, and characters start feeling incoherent, or they start feeling they lack utility. Like they become kind of one note. Like so, Tywin is reliably going on about your duty to the family, like all the time.
Yeah.
Even when there's opportunities to kind of show a different side of him, like the side that kind of regrets Elia Martell's death, and like he didn't know what he had in Gregor could gain, and you know, would you think I would have ordered that? You know, that sort of thing. They don't really touch on it, so they can do better. And I mean, the material is there, and it's just I wish they would trust it more, and I really wish they kept away from the cliches that they keep going toward. Like this is all the audience will accept. We have to make it like this because the audience is too stupid. Like, come on, we're in the 21st century. The audience is if you look at Twitter, you're gonna see lots of people who don't understand something. It doesn't matter if they don't understand it. Make it for the people who adored the complexities of a show like The Sopranos or The Deadwood. Make it for the people. Make it as if you were Milch. Make it as if you're Kubrick. Make it as somebody who knows it doesn't matter if necessarily everyone is going to love it now. Everyone will know how great it is in time.
And also, you can do both, I think. The novels show that. I'm sure there are people who read A Song of Ice and Fire in a much more superficial way than perhaps other readers who don't necessarily get all the nuances and the subtleties. We see that in how people discuss some of the characters, how some characters are completely dismissed. Oh, Sansa is just stupid and Catelyn is just so annoying, and they are still enjoying the story very much, even though they're missing those nuances. So it doesn't hurt to have the nuances there for those who can understand and appreciate them.
For who unappreciate them, or they're the ones who rewatch and appreciate them afterward, which is part of the thing about the rereadability value of the novels. Yeah. They can be reread sometimes, and you keep coming up across new things that you haven't thought about, or the connections you missed. And I think they kind of lose that in the course of a show. Yeah. So that's what we want. We want a show that avoids the cliches, and that when it changes something, it's genuinely an improvement or necessity. Yeah. It's not something that is we like it better or this is easier to do. So let's move to the Red Wedding, because the Red Wedding, you've heard our thoughts on this already. I actually wanted to spoil because then there are critics like at Grantland who felt kind of the same. Like they didn't quite understand. They didn't think it worked as well as it could have, and for me, it's because they made it all about the shock. Yeah. Now, Sean T. Collins of Boiled Leather is a person I really respect. I mean, I got him to help annotate, and he's really smart and clever. And he's a critic for Rolling Stones as well. Yeah. And I was listening to his latest podcast because someone was noting that he had some comment on Purist, and I mean he made a Twitter remark. Yeah. And I didn't connect it, but I think it was related to it, where he kind of told for book purists you might as well quit watching now. Yeah. And in it he says regarding the Red Wedding, and his answer is basically you would have liked more foreboding. You would have who cares? His response is, who cares that it wasn't as good as it could have been? This is the way I take it. It was good enough to amaze all these people. And I think, is that really the standard to which art is held? Is it good enough? Yeah. Or should we not be looking at, is this the best possible thing they could have done? Or could they have done it better?
I mean, it's also about paying tribute to the material, isn't it? And paying tribute to the characters. And
a strong part of our reaction is the fact that it seemed to us like they were on the same page. Like, they kept citing it as the thing they would... Like, if they could only get up to that point, they would feel satisfied.
And then you think that when they're talking about this as the big event, surely they're taking into account the whole package. Yes. But they seem to just focus on the fact that, oh my god, he killed these characters.
Yeah, so to me, I mean, the enormous praise of it is basically, like, what are we really praising? Are we praising the shocking turn of the murders of Robb and Catelyn in the end. But that's George R. R. Martin did that in 2000, 2001.
Yeah.
George did that.
Yeah.
So what are we praising them for? What is their contribution to that?
Yeah. Obviously, they don't necessarily, even if they had done it faithfully, they are not contributing necessarily anything new. But I think it would have. Then at least they are paying tribute to the story as written and doing their best to convey the same emotions.
Yes, but to me also, I mean, what George did was really ambitious the way he did it.
Yes.
And for them to follow through, I felt they should be equally ambitious as the way they approached it. And I don't think they were ambitious at all.
No.
They did it in the easiest way possible, which is just making a big, shocking event. I mean, seeing Dan Weiss say in the Inside the episode twice in a single sentence, it's shocking, it's shocking. Well, that's what they focused on. It's a shock. We're going to make it as big a shock as possible. And I think someone in comments said to me, and I think they were right, like, what idea is scarier to you? You turn a corner, you cross the street, and you get hit by a car and you die, or being buried alive?
Yeah.
Being buried alive, of course, is far scarier.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be trapped there, and you know your death is coming, but it's a slow, lingering. You have something. Whereas the shock of a sudden thing happening is just kind of like, you can't even process it. It's like, it's not, it's cheap, it's easy. So when it felt to me like they took the easy approach, and I was very disappointed in them. So the Red Wedding, I mean, with someone like Sean, you know, and who I respect a lot, says, you know, who cares? That seems so dismissive of all people who said, like, well, we care.
Yeah.
And then, so what does he mean by who cares? And to me, it read like, well, only those people, but like, we shouldn't judge it by how good it could have been. We can only judge it by the reaction. It's like, you know, Justin Bieber sells millions of albums. I'm pretty sure he could probably make a far greater album than he does artistically. Or I could be wrong. I mean, I don't know. But in theory, he could probably do something artistically with far greater integrity. He could, in theory, do that. But he doesn't. He does what's good enough to sell millions of copies, to go platinum. And that's all his fans really want. Good enough. In fact, if he were to go and do something radically different, they would yell at him because he's not the same person he was before. But there would be critics who'd say, "Wow, you know, this is what people are going to really remember 100 years from now. This is great."
I mean, it's a little bit to take music. You know, you're making a cover of like a great song, and you're perhaps popularizing it and making it more poppy and modern, and it might go over really well, but you know, artistically and technically, you have probably lost something, or you may have lost something compared to the original.
Yeah, but who cares if it's popular?
Yeah, if it's a bigger hit, who cares? No, I can't. For me, you know, it is an adaptation, and I will always look at it in light of
the source material.
The source material, how good it could be, and I think that with one of the strengths. I mean, we talked so much about how this is all about the shock because you don't have the foreboding, and also one of the strengths is that it kind of, the way it's written in the novels, it kind of makes you complicit somehow in it.
Yes.
In that you're sitting there and you're wanting it to be over, and you sort of have a little bit of the feeling of this is a bit of a train wreck. You don't really know that it's a train wreck at the end, but this is going badly, and you want to get to the end, and then you get what you wanted, and it's so horrific.
Yes. So I don't know. I think so who cares? We care, and other people care, and you can say, well, you're a small minority. Well, that may be true, but there's so many things you can point to where only small minorities cared or liked it, and that they are the ones who were in the right at the end. This is going to always be one of those most shocking moments, but it's like, it's George R. R. Martin's shock, and I don't really see. The only thing I can really say is they didn't screw it up. They didn't turn it. They didn't decide to turn it into a little musical number. They didn't try to play it off as a big laugh. They didn't try to do a cheap Clockwork Orange kind of thing with it, with kind of hectic, sped up cameras and mad laughter and this trying. They didn't. They did fine.
It's solid. It's fine.
It's solid.
Yeah.
They did.
But it could have been even.
It could have been. It could have been better. It
Yeah.
could have been richer, and it could have been. And it's not because of budget. It's because they chose not to.
Yeah.
It's because they chose a particular approach that was easier to do.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's shocking people by hiding, you know, your hand.
And this doesn't really have anything, because I've seen so many people saying that it was all internal to Catelyn. Well, no, it isn't, because so much it is the surrounding atmosphere, the bad food, the bad music, the ungracious host. We get it in. I thought they were very much on the right track when we see all the phrase reception.
The first part was spot on.
It's spot on.
Just continue that.
And why not continue like that? It should be oppressive and uncomfortable the whole time.
So they have comedy moments, like the Blackfish looking at the homely free ladies, giggling about him and him looking away. I mean, it carries away, like it just takes away from it, and it's just I just.
And I mean, the thing is, shocks on TV. That's nothing novel. I mean, haven't people watched Spartacus?
Yeah.
They had a nice little bloodbath at the end there, as the second season, that they murdered everyone basically. Yeah. It's not that shocking even.
I mean, I don't want to take away from people who were really shocked, because there were people who were really shocked.
Yes, but in the shock itself is not a novel.
But no, the shock itself is no longer novel. I mean, when George did it, it was a bit of a novelty, I guess.
For
it
the
genre
that in particular,
bloody-minded.
yes.
For a genre.
Yeah.
But what raises it from to a high arch.
And the lasting impact.
The lasting impact.
When you reread it.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to be shocked when I reread.
Because people are still talking about it, and they talk about it in terms, it's because of how the impact it had on them and the way it was presented to them.
Yeah.
It's not just this shocking event.
Yeah.
It's this shocking event that was so rich in sort of a sense of things going to hell, and like you didn't quite process it, or you didn't quite understand it until it's too late. And now afterward, I've had people say, I have non-reader friends who told me they knew something was wrong. Well, they knew something was wrong because it's episode 9, or because Roose Bolton refused to drink wine. Never mind what they've already established. He doesn't drink wine because he doesn't like it. I mean, he did that with Jaime. It's not because it's a plot.
No.
There's so many things that people are citing. Fine, if you felt foreboding on it, so be it. But to me, tonally, when they have Catelyn, Catelyn was forced smiling. She wasn't really in a good mood.
What was Roose's comment about having a fat young wife? That's her showing disapproval of
his attitude.
Not
about her being, when she's laughing, smiling. So I mean, to me, a lot of it is people are kind of saying projecting. They want to read it in a way that's pretty clear, but wasn't intended.
Yeah.
What they intended was, you're not supposed to know until it starts until the Rains of Castamere.
Yeah.
And at that point, they really started to get it. But to me, it should have been the whole thing. It should have been this powerful building sense of something's wrong, so that when you get it, maybe you even realize what's going to happen, but you can't stop it. You are, as some people, you're on a train to hell, and there's no getting off.
No,
you're stuck on it, and in some ways, it's more horrible knowing you're going to, it's like
this airplane is crashing. And you're not getting off.
Yeah. That is more frightening, a thought. Like, like there's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
So I think the building, focusing so much on just making it as shocking as possible by hiding it and making it all look all right was.
But it's their tendency. They do it with a lot of things. They do these flip-flops, shocks, whatever. And
yeah. So that's our issue with Benioff and Weiss. And that's it for our discussion for season 3.
See you again next year. Obviously, we'll be, I expect, doing our weekly bonus materials on YouTube for each episode, and perhaps some lead-up material. We don't quite know what we'll do for season 4, but
plus also possibly videos about the books.
Yes, during the summer if we have time for that. So keep an eye on the channel.
Bye.